Hello. Welcome to the quiet time that arrives after a long, exhausting day. This is Slow Night, Ancient Tales. The story we will share with you tonight is Gwanggongja, a short story by author Kim Dong-in. Gwanggongja translates to the Mad Prince, referring to the crown prince who willingly took upon himself the role of a madman. It tells the tale of King Sejong the Great, considered Joseon's greatest and wisest ruler, and his older brother, Prince Yangnyeong, who gladly pretended to go astray, stepping down from his position as crown prince so that his younger brother could ascend the throne. The novel illustrates a deep and affectionate brotherly bond that never froze, even before the cold winds of power. Let us follow the lonely yet magnificent heart of a man hidden in history, who chose to bear lifelong disgrace just to protect his brother. I hope this story comforts your weary heart tonight. And now, let the story begin. Dong-in's collection of historical tales, 3 Gwanggongja, The Mad Prince, author, Kim Dong-in, source, Yadam, December 1937, swoosh. As he sat in the room, absent-mindedly gazing up at the sky visible beneath the eaves, what flashed by was either a meaningless falling leaf or a bird flying in the sky. He was a young prince at an age where, if seen as a boy, he was still a boy, and if seen as a young man, he was fully a young man. He was currently the crown prince of this nation, and the noble young prince who would become the future king. The sky he looked up at today and the sky he saw yesterday were skies of the same light and color. It was cheerful, it was bright, it was magnificent. It must have been that light 1,000 years ago. It will also be that light 1,000 years later. However, why is his state of mind today so vastly different from that day around this time last year, when he looked up at that sky from this exact spot? "Your Highness, Father, Your Majesty," he called out inwardly 2 or 3 times, while inwardly calling and calling upon the one who was the king in public and his father in private. Endless tears flowed from the eyes of this boy, or perhaps young man. It was a position where his heart was truly tormented and pained. What could he do? He did not regret giving up this position of crown prince that he currently held. He didn't regret it, but his heart ached. What should he do? He looked up at the bright and cheerful sky, but his heart did not become the least bit cheerful. It was something he had just experienced a moment ago. When he went to pay his morning respects to the one who was both king and father, he was reprimanded without any reason. If someone like you becomes king in the future, you will completely ruin the country. It was a rebuke. Even viewing it through the private relationship of father and son, especially the eldest son, this was a somewhat excessive reprimand, and moreover, since his current position was the crown prince, it was an even more unacceptable way to treat the crown prince. On top of that, no matter how much he examined and thought about it, there was no reason to be reprimanded at all. It wasn't that he didn't understand his father's state of mind. His father wanted to take the position of crown prince away from him and give it to his 3rd younger brother, Yangnyeong. However, because there was no justifiable excuse to do so, he was only venting anger and rage. It had been barely 20 years since the founding of Yi Joseon, and it was still too recent since they overthrew the nearly 500-year-long, not-so-short-lived Goryeo Wang dynasty, so public sentiment could not yet be considered stable. At such a time, what kind of situation was this, where emotions were tangled between sovereign and subject, and father and son, over the issue of the future throne? It was embarrassingly wretched. He wanted to just throw this position of crown prince to his brother, saying, "Here, take it." However, the reason he couldn't do that was, first, he could not let his royal father bear the infamous reputation of changing the crown prince without cause down to the last generation, and second, his wise brother Yangnyeong would absolutely not step into the position of crown prince if it came to him without a proper reason. Therefore, he could not easily give up this position either. But on the other hand, he couldn't just pretend not to notice, and the reason for that was, first, because he knew his royal father's personality well. In the past, Bang Baeon and Bang Suk, his royal father's half-brothers and the crown prince's uncles, were harmed by his royal father because of the throne. And later, Bangan, his royal father's full brother, was also exiled for the same issue and passed away there. So given his royal father's personality, he would not spare even his closest kin over issues of the throne. Lately, for some reason, even life itself did not seem that precious to the crown prince. So whether he lived or died was not an issue, but he did not want to pass an infamous reputation on to his royal father. And second, the personality of Yangnyeong, whom his royal father was inwardly eyeing, was extraordinary. So if he were to ascend the throne in the future, his virtuous influence would be something that the crown prince himself could never match. The crown prince, who was relatively mature and broad-minded, as well as possessing outstanding discernment, was at an age where others would still be flying kites and playing pranks, but he possessed the discernment to recognize people. Reflected in this discernment, his brother Yangnyeong was by no means an ordinary person. Being in such a position, even under a cheerful sky at an age when he should be at his most cheerful, he felt only a dark and gloomy mood. Days passed, months went by, and seasons changed as he lived like this. It was autumn. Rustle. Every time the wind blew, the countless falling leaves scattering in the courtyard were relentlessly gathered and swept away by the Chunbang servants. But there was no end to them. The crown prince, with the door slightly open, absent-mindedly watched the leaves dancing in the courtyard. His complexion was very haggard. He aimlessly looked down at the courtyard for about 15 minutes, then 30 minutes. Presently, a court official came to the bottom of the courtyard and bowed deeply. Gyeonggung is arriving. The crown prince nodded lightly, and then he stood up. Gyeonggung was a bingek, a title for a senior second-rank official of the crown prince's tutorial office, who always came to the Chunbang to teach the crown prince the ways of a prince. He was the son of Yi Jon-oh, who was famous for refuting the arrogance of the prime minister Shindan when Shindan's power was fierce during the reign of King Gongmin of Goryeo, while serving as a newly appointed minor official, a Jongyeon. He had passed the state examination during the Goryeo dynasty, continued down to the Yi dynasty, and was enfiofed as a prince for his meritorious service during the Bakpo rebellion. His name was Yi Rei. Hearing that this Yi Rei was coming, the crown prince stood up from his seat. Then he stepped out of the door and down into the courtyard. Just in time, Yi Rei was stepping inside the palace gate. The crown prince pretended not to see Yi Rei, and gazing up and scanning the sky, he made the sound of calling a falcon while slowly walking back to the rear garden. The crown prince, who had gone to the rear garden, returned to the front while continuously making the falcon calling sound. Even until then, Yi Rei was standing in the Chunbang courtyard with a stern demeanor, with his servants behind him. The crown prince simply passed right in front of Yi Rei. However, pretending not to know that Yi Rei was standing there, he just kept scanning the sky and continued making the falcon calling sound. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." But the Crown Prince kept walking and making the falcon sound as if he hadn't heard. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Yi Rei followed behind him. He called out repeatedly. After following him while calling out for quite a while like this, he finally quickened his pace helplessly, went in front of the Crown Prince, and turned to face him. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Only then did the Crown Prince feign surprise, as if he had finally recognized the bingek's arrival. "Ah, when did you get here?" "I arrived quite a while ago." The charm of the falling leaves was so nice that I was lost in it, and..." Yi Rei, with his back bowed, raised his head slightly and looked up at the Crown Prince. He looked up for a moment and then opened his mouth. "Your Highness, why were you making the sound of a falcon?" "You were making the sound of a falcon just now, so what is the reason?" "Falcon? What is a falcon?" "You know the bird that you receive on your arm when you go hunting, the one that snatches pheasants or rabbits. That is a falcon. How could a person like me, who has never even seen a falcon in his life, make a falcon sound?" Yi Rei looked up again. In front of that upward gaze, the Crown Prince constantly rolled his eyes left and right, gestured, and acted restless. "Your Highness, are you feeling unwell somewhere?" "I looked at the sky for a long time, so my eyes are a bit dazzled." That day, Jesonggun Yi Rei discovered various unusual behaviors from the Crown Prince. His dislike for learning was obvious. Until now, the Crown Prince had wanted to know even one more character and realize even one more phrase. But that day, for whatever reason, even when Yi lectured in front of him, he didn't seem to be listening. Even in the middle of lecturing on the teachings of ancient sages in front of the crown prince, it was common for the crown prince to sit blankly and then blurt out nonsensical remarks. When Yi was in the middle of explaining the meaning of a text, the crown prince would suddenly call a servant and order some other task. To put it simply, it was clear that Yi was talking to himself, and the crown prince was having his own separate thoughts. In Yi mind, this was far too bizarre. After finishing the lecture and withdrawing from the chunbang, Yi went in to see the king and reported, "Upon observing the crown prince during today's lecture, he seemed unwell, so let us send a royal physician to take his pulse." From then on, the crown prince's attitude changed day by day. He disliked studying. If he only disliked studying, the issue would be different, but his behavior gradually became fraught with suspicious points. He was an elegant prince. He was a young man proficient in both literary and martial arts. But in the current crown prince, not a trace of elegance could be found, no matter how hard one looked. His eyes never rested in one place for even a moment. Darting, looking around, moving up, down, front, back, left and right, rolling about. Since his eyes were like that, his other actions could not settle down either, making him look to others like a person who had committed some great crime. Far from a noble prince, he seemed like the child of the lowest of the low among commoners. He left bird traps set up in the courtyard. And when the left and right bingake of the tutorial office were in the middle of a lecture, if a bird came and got caught in the trap, he would run out in his stocking feet, take out the caught bird, reset the trap, and come back in. Even during official morning audiences, when the crown prince was absolutely required to attend upon the king and receive greetings, he would evade them all, saying he couldn't do it today because his head hurt, or he couldn't attend today due to such and such reasons. So, if one were to find out if his head really hurt, or if there was an unavoidable situation, it wasn't true. He would be lying around in the chunbang or out hunting. Showing that these were nothing more than temporary lies, fabricated just to avoid his duties. He avoided opportunities to face his royal father as much as he could. Even his daily morning and evening greetings were mostly done by proxy through an attendant. When it was absolutely unavoidable to see him, he would see him briefly and immediately withdraw. Of course, all these actions were meant to make the world think of him as a madman, so that he would naturally be deposed according to public opinion. Firstly, to spare his royal father the infamy of changing the crown prince without reason, and secondly, to allow his wise brother Yangnyeong to rule over the people and bathe them in the monarch's virtuous influence. But in truth, he also disliked facing his royal father. Because whenever they met, his father would inevitably get angry and unfairly scold, so he wanted to avoid him as much as possible. While feigning such madness, he also frequently engaged in wild behaviors that a crown prince should never commit. Whenever a crown prince goes out, a formal procession must be prepared, but this crown prince did not do so. He often went out on foot, taking only 1 or 2 chunbang guards with him. There were even times he went to gisang houses. At night, he would even climb over the palace walls all by himself and wander around looking for women. As this madness and wild behavior increased day by day, public criticism gradually began to arise. However, mindful ministers guessed why the crown prince's erratic behavior had started, sympathized with his feelings, and often quietly consoled him. While there were such ministers, there were also many who, guessing the current king's state of mind, quickly began flattering Grand Prince Yangnyeong in advance, who was 9 times out of 10 going to be the new crown prince, and catered to the king by saying, "The crown prince is committing such and such wild acts, so please depose the foolish and elevate the wise." One day, Huang Hui, who was the minister of personnel at the time, came to the chunbang to see the crown prince. The crown prince, who was usually elegant when alone, but started acting mad when someone came, was reading the scriptures by himself. Upon hearing that Minister Huang was coming, he quickly hid the book, lay face down on his mattress, rested his chin on his hands, and looked outside through the open window. Even when the eunuch came in and announced the arrival according to protocol, The crown prince just nodded while remaining lying face down. Subsequently, even when Huang Hui bowed from outside the door, the crown prince didn't even pretend to notice and just kept looking out at the courtyard. Even though Huang Hui was standing with his hands clasped, waiting for the order to sit down, the crown prince kept looking at the courtyard, whether he knew or not. The attending eunuch felt awkward and pressed the crown prince. "Your Highness, the crown prince, Minister Huang has come to pay his respects." "Yeah, tell him I'm fine." Huang Hui was also embarrassed. Because he understood the crown prince's feelings, this madness of deliberately inviting insult was incredibly painful to watch. "Your Highness, the crown prince, the weather is quite warm." Having no other choice, Huang Hui spoke first. "Is that so? I wouldn't know since I haven't been outside." The crown prince replied while remaining face down, resting his chin on his hands, simply looking out at the courtyard. It was fine because he knew the crown prince's heart well, but if someone who didn't understand his feelings had experienced this, how much would they have cursed the crown prince? Towards a current senior second-rank minister of personnel, no matter if he is the crown prince, the protocol of reception is established by law. Yet treating him like a lowly subordinate would only bring criticism back upon the crown prince himself. How much must the crown prince's heart hurt, doing this while knowing it so well? Huang Hui was in his prime and not easily agitated by ordinary things, yet tears welled up in his eyes. The crown prince lay face down for a long time, but since he wasn't someone raised with such habits, his body felt uncomfortable, and he had no choice but to sit up. "Ah, please sit down. You were still standing. You should have told me you were standing. But Minister Huang, water keeps falling from your eyes. What kind of water is that?" "Your Highness. Your Highness, why are you neglecting to personally pay your respects to His Majesty?" Seeing that the king already disliked the crown prince and hated him even more because of this, he earnestly pleaded. The crown prince's reply was simple: "I don't go because the old man's smell is repulsive." Huang Hui felt a chill in his chest. It was a deliberate act of madness, but the words went a bit too far. For Huang Hui, who knew the king's temperament well, if such words reached the king, let alone deposition, it was hard to predict what else might happen. In the eyes of Huang Hui, who had the ability to judge character, the superiority and inferiority between the brothers, the crown prince and grand prince Yangnyeong, were neck and neck. It was hard to tell who was better. The wisdom of the crown prince and the wisdom of grand prince Yangnyeong were so evenly matched that one could not say who was better or worse. The position of crown prince is not something to be easily changed. So even if grand prince Yangnyeong were slightly superior, things must be handled carefully, and it is unjust to rashly depose and replace. Furthermore, to switch these evenly matched brothers purely based on the royal father's personal affections and animosities would be a wrongful act that would leave trouble for generations to come. In front of this crown prince who was outwardly pretending to be a madman, Huang Hui sat silently, only shedding tears. It was one ripe autumn day. The king was seated in the royal study, and a good number of civil and military ministers had gathered, relaxed, and engaged in idle chatter. The king, who had been looking outside while listening without order to this person's story and that person's story, shifted his gaze to the persimmon tree within the palace grounds over there. There were a few persimmon trees there, and on the sparse trees whose leaves had all fallen, several bright red persimmons were hanging. However, a few crows were pecking at the persimmons there. The king looked around the gathering. "Is there anyone here who can shoot and hit that crow sitting on the persimmon tree over there?" Civil officials naturally could not step forward, and he asked, expecting that someone among the tall military officers would confidently volunteer. The king, who had long seen master archers like King Taijo and Tung Duran, thought that hitting a crow over there wouldn't be that difficult. However, the tall officers and other military officials were at a loss, and no one stepped forward. "Isn't there anyone?" The king even pressed them once more, but still no one stepped forward. The king slightly regretted it inwardly. He had brought up a pointless remark and embarrassed his subjects. On the other hand, he wasn't without worry about the state of affairs that had gradually grown weak in martial prowess. When the gathering was awkwardly silent due to the pointless issue that arose, Huang Hui broke the silence. Among the military officials in the court, there is likely no one who can hit it. In this day and age, the only person who can shoot and hit a flying bird that far away is Our Highness the Crown Prince. The entire gathering felt relieved. It was a unanimous opinion that the Crown Prince could easily hit it, but no one other than the Crown Prince could. He immediately summoned the Crown Prince. "Will you easily be able to shoot and hit that crow over there?" The king, who normally only got angry when facing the Crown Prince because he already disliked him, frowned as usual and asked, "I will try shooting, but how could I hit the target?" This was his reply. However, the implication that wouldn't I be able to hit something like that was clear. After grabbing the waiting bow and plucking the string once, he aimed and let go of the string. The arrow that flew with a sound pierced through two crows pecking at the persimmons all at once. The king also smiled slightly. It was a smile he showed toward the Crown Prince for the first time in many years. This country, which has a person like your highness who excels in both literary and martial arts as the Crown Prince, seems to be sitting on a solid rock. Huang Hui's congratulations here heavily contained the meaning, "This is why the Crown Prince must not be replaced." Realizing that meaning, an unpleasant expression reappeared on the king's face. There was no way that his deeply ingrained thought of deposition would be overturned because of this minor incident that occurred that day. Entering the year of Musul, the Crown Prince's erratic behavior worsened. The previous year, citing that too many miscreants were frequenting the Chumbang, some were caught and executed, and some were exiled. But miscreants continued to come without interruption, and the frequency of the Crown Prince sneaking out also increased. The king, who had once been a subject of the Goryeo dynasty, was now simply waiting for appeals from the censors. Just as there are such subjects in every era, naturally several subjects would appear to appeal for his deposition, citing various misdeeds of the Crown Prince, merely to cater to the king's wishes. Then, the king intended to reject them a few times before carrying out the deposition in accordance with public consensus. The time was ripe. This king, possessing a stubborn personality, once he started to dislike a person, he would just hate them to the very end and never muster any sympathy. Even though he clearly knew the reason for the Crown Prince's recent erratic behavior, the thought of sympathizing with his feelings never crossed his mind, and he only anxiously wished for the deposition to happen as quickly as possible. The Crown Prince sometimes stayed up all night crying alone. It wasn't simply because he would miss the position of Crown Prince. It was because of the infamy he would hear of until the end of generations. Deposition was now an imminent matter that would surely arrive without a long wait. When that happens, how will historians record and leave behind this fact? There was no need to think long. The Crown Prince neglected his studies, indulged in debauchery, befriended prostitutes, and was inevitably deposed. Naturally, they would write it like this: "Must I bear this infamy even 1,000 or 10,000 years later?" It was said he did not strive in his studies, but the Crown Prince himself firmly believed that, let alone ordinary civil officials, even among the Confucian scholars, those whose academic prowess could match his were extremely rare. In martial arts as well, from weaponry like archery and swordsmanship to strategy and tactics for commanding the three armies, he also firmly believed that it would not be easy to find a military officer who could match him. The only person in this world who was superior to him was Yangnyeong, who would take his place if he were deposed now. Besides him, there would be no one who could match him. For someone like him to forever bear the infamy of being deposed for neglecting studies in the future was truly unjust. Thinking about this injustice, there were many times he sobbed through the night. Moreover, lately, the so-called public opinion seemed to be gradually rising. Even the group making appeals under the guise of public opinion, saying, "The Crown Prince neglects his studies, indulges in debauchery, and is thus and such, so he must be deposed," clearly knew his true feelings. Furthermore, calling themselves Confucian scholars, seeing that those establishing the public opinion were mostly among a group who could not even properly recite a single verse from the elementary learning, bearing infamy caused by such a group felt even more unfair. Your Highness, Father, I will give the position of Crown Prince to Yangnyeong as per your wish, but please spare me this infamy alone. Did his royal father not know of this plea cried out while weeping through the night. Finally, the time came for public opinion to rise openly. It was June of the Musul year. Although public opinion did arise, since everyone knew of the Crown Prince's injustice, it did not gain massive traction. Having no choice, the king could not help but urge public opinion further. One day he said to the subjects Ati Ndinghim, "The Crown Prince has lost his virtue so much that I am considering deposing him and elevating his eldest son, that is, his own eldest grandson." He spoke these words. In response to this, the gathered subjects said, "Your Majesty has spared no effort in personally raising and educating the Crown Prince, yet he still lost his virtue. Now, would a young grandson raised under the Crown Prince's care be suitable? Moreover, deposing a father to elevate his son is not right according to righteousness," they said. "Then what should I do? Among my several sons, who seems the wisest? No one knows the sons and subjects better than the ruler and father. It depends entirely on your holy will." Thus, among the sovereign and subjects, the issue of deposition became a topic of discussion. In this way, the deposition was decided unofficially, but there were two people sacrificed in this deposition. One was Huang Hui. Huang Hui, as the Minister of Personnel, repeatedly implored the king to abandon the thought of deposition, thereby incurring the king's wrath. He was demoted to Minister of Public Works, then dropped to the Inspector of Pyongan Province, and when the deposition was executed, he was reduced to a commoner, banished to Gyoha, and when the censors requested his punishment, he was moved again to Namwon. Yi Jik, also as a minister, opposed the deposition and was sent into exile. These two men who were punished at that time could not be exonerated even after the new king took the throne, and it was only after the abdicated king passed away that they were recalled to become illustrious ministers of the new king. 2 or 3 days after the deposition was unofficially decided in this manner, the 3 dukes, 6 ministers, 3 meritorious subjects, civil and military officials, and royal relatives lined up and memorialized the deposition of the Crown Prince. The long-awaited matter finally succeeded here. The Crown Prince was deposed and named Grand Prince Yangnyeong. Grand Prince Yangnyeong was installed as the Crown Prince, and the deposed Crown Prince Yangnyeong was banished to Gwangju. The Crown Prince was replaced in June, and in August of that year, the king retired to become the King Emeritus, and the Crown Prince, who was Grand Prince Yangnyeong, took the throne as the new king. This new king is King Sejong the Great. The edict deposing Grand Prince Yangnyeong stated, "Appointing a wise person as heir is a great principle of all ages, and deposing one with faults is a constant rule of the state. I early on made my eldest son, Jae, the Crown Prince. But even as he grew older, he disliked studying and furthermore liked debauchery. However, I thought he would mend his ways as he aged. But passing 20, he became even worse, excessively fraternizing with rogues, resulting in many being executed last spring. At that time, the Crown Prince wrote down all his faults, reported them to the royal shrine, and submitted a memorial to me, seemingly repenting. Yet not long after, receiving the schemes of the treacherous official Han Ro, his erratic behavior returned as before. Therefore, out of fatherly grace, I forbade him from interacting with Han Ro. But instead of repenting, the Crown Prince harbored resentment and indignantly submitted a memorial, the meaning of which was extremely insolent, showing absolutely no etiquette between sovereign and subject. The State Council, meritorious officials, 6 ministries, censors, and civil and military officials jointly memorialized, saying that the Crown Prince's behavior seems unable to inherit the state. While Grand Prince Yangnyeong is bright, respectful, filial, gentle, and strives in his studies, making him worthy of the Crown Prince's duties. Therefore, I follow their words, depose the Crown Prince, banish him to Gwangju, and elevate Grand Prince Yangnyeong to make him the Crown Prince, etc. Grand Prince Yangnyeong ascended the throne, and he himself became the King Emeritus, so the King Emeritus's hopes were all fulfilled. However, the King Emeritus's hatred towards his eldest son never changed. From now on, I will not see Yangnyeong as my son, so if he violates the law, the state council may arrest him, or the 6 ministries may arrest him. Execute according to the law. He even ordered this. His inner meaning was an instruction to catch him and give him a hard time. King Sejong the Great, an illustrious ruler rarely seen in all times and places, ascended the throne after witnessing such an unfortunate event. Yangnyeong, who was banished to Gwangju to put this younger brother on the throne. Having now shaken off all the petty and bothersome issues of the secular world, he was truly an immortal. The only worry that still remained was the petty meddling of small-minded people. He knew well the filial and brotherly affection of his younger brother who had now become king, so it wasn't something to worry about too much, but still, if the meddling of miscreants went too far, might it cause something that would blemish his younger brother's holy virtue? Yangnyeong, who is currently in Gwangju, is a person with such and such misdeeds, so please send him far away into exile. Or Yangnyeong resents being deposed and is now plotting evil thoughts and deeds with so-and-so, so please arrest him and execute him. Undoubtedly, there would be many such groups. Many small-minded people would emerge, making such false accusations, believing that this would earn them the new king's trust. Knowing his brother well, he guessed he wouldn't be swayed by ordinary false accusations, but what if the slander went too far and blemished his holy virtue? It was one bright morning. A leisurely and free commoner, Yangnyeong, was preparing to go out for some hunting he enjoyed, when a palace official rushed over from the palace. He was asked to come to the eastern suburbs. The king, thinking of his older brother who must be lonely in Gwangju, earnestly wanted to meet him for the first time in a while. So that day, he suddenly ordered the preparation of a royal procession to go see the autumn scenery of the eastern suburbs, while simultaneously sending an official ahead to ask his brother to come to the eastern suburbs. Grand Prince Yangnyeong also hurried his palanquin to the eastern suburbs without knowing why, and the government officials followed, thinking it was just a trip to view the autumn leaves. Then, at the eastern suburbs, subordinates sent ahead from the palace had set up a banquet, and Grand Prince Yangnyeong, who should have been at his place of exile in Gwangju, had also arrived there. The royal brothers spent a pleasant day unraveling the feelings that had been blocked up until then, and in the evening they parted ways, the king to the palace and Yangnyeong to Gwangju. At parting, the king even shed sad tears. That night, looking up at the moon from his place of exile, Yangnyeong felt a sorrowful emotion for the first time. Until then, he hadn't really felt such things, but coming back after seeing his younger brother today, the coldness of his place was beyond compare. The sound of geese flying in the sky sounded particularly mournful, and the sound of a bamboo flute coming from afar, not knowing who was blowing it or where, lingered boundlessly in his heart. His father and mother were still alive, his younger brother was extremely filial and loving as king, and he himself had no sins, so for what reason did he have to be here in a place of exile like this? Amidst his profound feelings of isolation, there was also something that worried him. From what he noticed today, it seemed the king hadn't given advance notice to the ministers about meeting him in the eastern suburbs today. Even earlier, there was something suspicious about the censors, who were prone to causing trouble, whispering among themselves while happily eating. Would he not suffer hardship from the troublesome Confucian scholars because of today's issue? Tangled with worry and feelings of isolation, Yangnyeong could not sleep a wink that night. Sure enough, the next day, an issue arose in the state council. They said it was not allowed. It is not allowed for the king to receive a sinner. This was their argument. They didn't just do this to the king. Among the subjects present today, there was even a fuss that Right State Councilor Meng Sasong and Vice Minister of Punishments Shin Gae had not said it is not allowed to the king. Meng Sasong sitting as a state councilor and Shin Gae sitting as a senior official of the Ministry of Punishments saw an improper act but said nothing, so explained the reason. That was what they said. In response, State Councilor Meng replied, "I had previously submitted a memorial advising not to see Yangnyeong, so yesterday I remained silent." And Vice Minister Shin said, "Since I naturally lack principled fortitude, and it is already too late, I will accept punishment according to the law." And the two men resigned. The king barely managed to calm down this escalating incident, and he sighed inwardly. Those who eat the state's stipends as subjects, having no other matters to advise the king on, roar so much over something like this. False accusations against Yangnyeong continuously came before the king. From the office of the Inspector General, the office of censors, the Royal Secretariat, the office of special advisors, from these groups incessantly came, "Please interrogate Yangnyeong. Please punish Yangnyeong more. The treatment of Yangnyeong is too generous." To such arguments pouring in one after another, the king always firmly shook his head. Once, when Kim Jong-so brought up the issue again, the king replied like an adult scolding a child. "You have spoken of Yangnyeong's matter many times, but this seems to be because you do not know my heart well. In the natural order of familial bonds, is not the position I now enjoy Yangnyeong's? Since I am enjoying it now, though I may feel sorry and awkward, I have no intention of hating or suspecting him in the slightest. Furthermore, regarding the affection between brothers, do not even those commoners reveal each other's good sides and cover up each other's flaws? And if unfortunately they commit a crime and are imprisoned, don't they try to rescue them by begging and even using bribes? That is brotherly affection. Would it do for me, sitting as king, to be worse than a mere commoner? Moreover, this position originally belonged to my brother. Once the King Emeritus's anger subsides in the future, I will bring him to Seoul and see him every day." And no matter who said what, if it was about Yangnyeong, he absolutely refused to listen. Whatever immense grudge these commendable subjects had against Yangnyeong, there was even a time when an issue arose because of Yangnyeong's son. The king, harboring apologetic feelings toward his older brother Yangnyeong, saw Yangnyeong's son growing up a bit, enfied him as Sun Pyongun, and tried to give him a position. Upon this, the censors in the state council rose up, raising a fuss, saying, "Let us also expel Yangnyeong's son to where his father is. A government post is absolutely forbidden." The king said, "Yangnyeong sinned against the royal ancestral shrine, so he was expelled helplessly. But what sin does my nephew have?" However, because they raised such a clamor, in the end he had him live outside the city walls. After several years passed like this, these subjects also finally realized that falsely accusing Yangnyeong to this king not only failed to earn them more favor, but conversely, it did nothing more than expose their own ill intentions. And only from then on did the mouths that slandered Yangnyeong close. A period of several years passed. Yangnyeong at his place of exile was waiting with his eyes wide open just for that. Would this king, whom he had installed in his stead by withdrawing himself, truly not deviate from what he had foreseen and leave behind great achievements? Or would it have been better for these people if he had just endured his royal father's wrath, held his ground, and become king himself? The achievements he had been waiting for with wide eyes gradually appeared. Thus the establishment of the Hall of Worthies. Thus compilations and creations. Thus the invention of the national script. Thus the pioneering of the 6 garrisons, and so on, and so on. The brilliant achievements of this king poured out endlessly. Among his subjects, there were no inherently great or bad ministers. Just by quietly remaining under this king, they naturally became great ministers. Where did such magnificent and numerous ideas pour out from? It wasn't that the king was hurriedly running around. Nor was he working his subjects to an unbearable degree. If they just went ahead and generously did the tasks he generously ordered, exactly as he directed, a magnificent achievement would be born. In the over 500 years of the Yi dynasty, this king was the only one whose virtuous influence reached all the way down to the commoners below the local gentry. In over 500 years, as a politician's achievement, the only other person to reach the commoners was Hongseon, Daewongun, Yi Ha-ong. Nearly 30 kings reigned, and among them were many illustrious and wise kings. But there was no time other than this king's reign when a king's virtue descended all the way to the commoners. Yangnyeong, who had placed this king on the throne as monarch while bearing the infamy of a madman and hearing the curses of neglecting studies and indulging in debauchery, watched this king's achievements progress day by day and gained enough confidence to loudly boast to himself that he had certainly not borne the infamy in vain. "Ah, Chongyong, my brother, your highness, may you live 10,000 years. May you live 10,000 years." Even while wearing an infamy he could never permanently shake off, Yangnyeong was satisfied. Not only that, it was hard to suppress the urge to climb to the top of Namsan Mountain and shout that thanks to him bearing the infamy, they had gained a magnificent king unparalleled in history. Behind the dazzling light named Sejong, there was the affectionate sacrifice of Grand Prince Yangnyeong, who willingly became a dark shadow. The heart of an older brother who, even while wearing an infamy that will never be erased, looked upon the era of peace achieved by his younger brother and quietly smiled, wishing him 10,000 years of life, leaves a deep and heavy resonance. Even behind the comfort we take for granted, someone's unseen affection might be hidden. You have truly worked hard today as well. Now, it is time to put down all the heavy burdens and complex thoughts carried on your shoulders and fall into the embrace of a deep, peaceful night. Until now, this has been Slow Night. Sleep stories. Have sweet dreams tonight as well. Good night.